The silent generation grew up with their parents, both witnessing the fall of Nazism and the rise of their new enemy in the era communism. When the children of this era began coming of age after World War II, they were faced with a devastated social order following World War II, as the Soviet Union betrayed America's post-war agreements, and the global powers would face off for the next 50 years. Unlike the previous generations who had fought for changing the system, the silent generation was about working within the system, keeping their heads down and working hard. They were heavily influenced by the golden age of radio, the rise of trade unions, the development of transatlantic flight, and the discovery of penicillin. During their formative years, silents tended to marry and have children young, and their attitude of taking no chances would become criticized by future more radical generations, such as boomers. Finally, we talk about the boomers, possibly the most famous modern birth generation and one of the most active time periods in American history. The boomers of the 40s, 50s, and 60s were known for their ridiculously high birth rates, with 76 million births taking place during this time period. This was due to a strong post-war economy in which Americans felt confident they would be able to support a large number of children. Boomers influenced the economy as a core marketing demographic for products tied to their age group, from toys to records. On top of this, many items previously deemed luxurious, such as laundry machines, the dishwasher, the refrigerator, and the telephone, entered mass production for the average consumer, and the average American could live like the upper class. From the previous generation, technological advances made before, during, and after the war, such as plastics, television, magnetic tape transistors, and integrated circuits and lasers, played a key role in the tremendous improvements in the typical standard of living. With this extended period of optimism came a cultural rush, especially in the music industry, where the Beatles, Bob Dylan, the Rolling Stones, and many other artists and bands all became extremely popular. Not everything was sunshine and rainbows, of course, as it was a time period where major political discussion around topics like the sexual revolution, civil rights, nuclear weaponry, ethnocultural diversity, and environmental protection all became popular and heavily debated. This was because this generation was a lot more radical. Many people during this time had different perspectives, and a lot of them favoured more left-leaning social causes in almost every direction, strongly opposing existing conservative traditionalist thinking. That plenty of others still had many of these major political disagreements resulted in protests that were becoming increasingly violent, especially as the Vietnam War lingered on and on. The United States would slowly become more divided, and government distrust would rise in the following generations. Generation X. This generation is often called the latchkey generation, which stems from the children of this generation returning from school to an empty home and needing to use a door key to let themselves in, as a result of living in an era of a lot of free-range parenting, increasing divorce rates, increased maternal participation in the workforce, and widespread availability of childcare options outside the home. Young adults of this time period were dubbed the MTV generation. Sometimes characterized as slackers, cynical, and disaffected, the baby boom era of the last generation was met with declining birth rates during this generation, partially due to the birth control bill being introduced in 1960 and abortion being legalized in 1973. However, demographic changes brought by the 1965 Immigration Act partially offset the declining birth rates from Americans already living there, and contributed to making Gen X in America more culturally and ethnically diverse than America had ever been. Gen X music saw many alternative rock, hip-hop, punk, post-punk, and heavy metal bands rise in popularity. Technological innovation boomed during this time period, with the rise of home, competing for manufacturers like Apple Commodore and Atari. Taken to the scene with their offerings, video games became a booming industry during the 1970s and 1980s, with arcades becoming widely successful across the country, a Nintendo and Atari, and introducing home consoles compared to boomers, Gen Xers were far more educated. As enrollment in college was way more popular, individualism and entrepreneurialism became one of the most defining trads with Gen X, as the collective generation would go on to produce Google, Wikipedia, Amazon, and YouTube towards the 90s and early 2000s. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, and comment below. See you next time.